Thank you, Alan. Okay, cool. All right, go ahead.
Keltner and Haidt proposed that all awe experiences have two central features in common: perceived vastness and a need for accommodation. While many stimuli that elicit awe are physically vast, Keltner and Haidt's idea of vastness goes beyond literal size and includes stimuli that are perceptually or conceptually vast, such as complex scientific theory. Vastness refers to anything that is experienced as being much larger than the self or the self's ordinary level of experience, they write. So while we can perceive a sense of vastness in the face of an open plain or giant redwood tree, it can also be induced by social size, like prestige, authority, or fame, or by something intricate or complex, like a fractal, whatever that is, or an impressive work of art or music. Essentially, any stimulus that exceeds a person's normal range of experience in one attribute or another could lead to the perception of vastness, as can stimuli that lead people to feel as if they are part of something larger than themselves.
Thank you. So, right, so many of these words were spoken by people just a few minutes ago, right? I mean, it's so that that's one criterion. Vastness understood in a very vast way. That's criterion number one. And then would someone else be willing to read the second paragraph expanding on accommodation? Yeah, Sue? Oh, Sue, we got to get you unmuted though.
Accommodation refers to psychologist Jean Piaget's process of adjusting mental structures that cannot assimilate a new experience. In other words, your conception of the world needs to shift or expand in order to make sense of this new experience. Importantly, Keltner and Haidt emphasize that awe involves a need for accommodation, which may or may not be met. The success of one's attempts at accommodation may partially explain why awe can be both terrifying when one fails to understand and enlightening when one succeeds, they write. The need for accommodation feature of awe explains why why we find these experiences so mind-blowing. Awe experiences actually prompt us to question and try to revise our understanding of the world.
Thanks very much, Sue. Right. So, according to these researchers of awe, those are the two bedrock components of the awe experience. Um, the vastness, but again, understood in ways that just go beyond our experience, not just visually vast or physically vast, and the fact that it throws us off to some extent, like our cognitive center of gravity, and needs to be we need to make some adjustments to accommodate it. And here, Deb mentioned the negative um, the negative end of the spectrum when we can't accommodate it, or when the experience at its essence is one that is threatening but can still be awe-inspiring, like a terrible natural disaster could hold both of those criteria, but it would not be it would not have the positive features that many other experiences of awe possess. So let's see. Nancy, did you want to say something before? Okay. All right. Um, does anyone have any questions or comments about this kind of basic definition? And again, I think what everyone said fits into what was written here. What Alan said about sitting quietly in a holy moment, that goes beyond most of our normal range of experience. And so there is something vast about slowing down and not forcing ourselves to do the next activity and instead just taking in the power of the present moment. And I think that fits into the vastness. Nancy.
The thing that I'm wondering about is this need for accommodation.
Yeah,
I mean, it implies you have to make sense of it somehow, or you're uncomfortable not making sense of it. If I'm reading that right, isn't it possible just to accept? Margie's got a thumbs up. People who study mindfulness with me are not surprised I'm saying this. I mean, can't it be just accepting that awe exists and the unknown is awe and just leaving it there? Do you
that's
have
a
to accommodate?
that's a great question. That's a great question.
I wonder if Deb has read about that.
Maybe Deb has a thought about that, and I see Carol also wanted to jump in. So um, let's. All right. So Deb and Rabbi Jeff, do you guys want to have thoughts about that question?
Well, in regime Piaget, you have to figure it out. The sense of being perplexed is sort of the engine of cognitive growth, but it's a very cognitive theory. So the kinds of emotional acceptance and richness we might have of being larger than our dissonance is not of great interest to Piaget. So.
Hmm.
And also, on the other hand, some of the research in awe is saying that it can lead to empathy, which is another kind of social emotional of accommodation. Like it leaves space to leave room for otherness.
Thank thank you, thank you both. All right. Carol was waiting, and then I see Alan wants to jump in too. Alan Fetter.
I don't know if this is helpful, but I recall when I took that class with that Rabbi Stone, we were grappling about the negative sort of envisioning awe as this powerful sort of ominous force. And he gave an example, not that we did everything from the Torah, but just at Sinai, like, when you read how there were fire and quakes and just to imagine that it would feel like the world was going to come to the end. I don't know if I don't know if any of the text says awe, but I remember all these years later, I thought that was very good way to describe it, because he said, you'd have to imagine something that again would be beyond words, but somewhat ominous. And I think it would take some accommodation, but anyway, that it just resonated.
Thank you, Carol. Alan?
So my understanding of Piaget's accommodation is that it's an experience that changes you. And the accommodation is the change that you need to make in order to take in that experience. And it changes somehow your understanding of the world, or a piece of the world. And, so it makes sense to me that if you have an experience that is as big as awe is, that it would change you in some way.
Thank you, Alan. So I think there's some good thoughts and the question about, exactly, like, if you had the experience. I did read somewhere that said if you didn't have both of these components, if you had vastness but without the need for the felt need to accommodate it in a new way, that technically didn't fit into the definition. But it's not clear to me why that is, and let's leave it on the table, and maybe we'll all do some thinking about it over the course of the week, and we can circle back next Monday and take another shot at that question. But that's very helpful to think about. So Okay. Thank you, everybody. So here's what I would like to do. I want to do a little kind of brief individual and then a small group sharing exercise in breakout rooms if people are willing to. No one's forced to do this if you don't want to, but I thought that we could all spend a couple of minutes just individually thinking about um, maybe a particular experience of awe that in our lives at any point, or more generally, if you wanted to think about your relationship to the experience of awe in your life. Is it something, is it prominent? Is it something, one would try to avoid? Is it something that one seeks out? So, either or both of those things, if we just take a couple minutes to individually write, and then we're going to go off, and I didn't warn Alan about this, but would it be a hard thing to set up 4 breakout rooms for this? Uh, or you
I'll see if I can remember how to do it.
It's yeah. I rehearsed it a little bit earlier. It seemed like it wasn't. If you wanna,
Yeah, I probably can do it. So
okay, all right. But let's. You don't have to write literally if you don't want to. But I just thought let's take like really like a couple of minutes and do some writing, and then we'll go into breakout rooms, and people will be invited to share if they want to what's come up in their reflection. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself, and I'll jump back on right before we go into breakout rooms. Okay, talk to you in a couple of minutes. Does everyone feel like they have had a little bit of time to focus on something? And again, this is totally voluntary. It's um so Alan, if you could create 4 breakout groups, they can be random, I think. And Alan, I'm thinking that you and I would both be part of a breakout group so that and I know that a couple of the groups will have 4 people, um, where there are 2 people in the same window. Um, and I was thinking we would go for about 10 minutes, and each person in the group would have 2 to 3 minutes to talk if they wanted to
All
about.
right, I think we're all set.
Cool. Thank you. Oh wow. Hi everybody. Is everyone back?
It looked like everybody.
It's not everybody. Are we still, maybe just one breakout room is still going on?
Well, I closed all the rooms except you got to volunteer to leave, so people are not leaving.
Oh, you can't like force people to come back? I
I don't know. Let me see here. Let me see.
I thought you could as the host. You had that power.
Well, maybe I do. I just don't know it,
You
It
gotta
looks
you
like,
gotta discover your power.
yeah. It looks like room 3 is a holdout here. No, there you are, Nancy. You're back.
Okay.
Back.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I think we're good.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for facilitating that, Alan. So, welcome back, everybody. I wanted to just briefly ask if anyone has if that experience of talking about awe in your life or listening to other people talking about awe in their lives, was that, I don't know, was that different than other kinds of conversation? I mean, we do sometimes, we do have sharing on about a variety of things at different kinds of gatherings, in adult education contexts. But is that something you've done before? Talked about awe with other people? Paula?
No,
I
this was it.
didn't mean to put you on the spot, Paula. I just saw that you were unmuted. I was like, I thought maybe you were wanting to share something. That's great. That's great. I think we should talk about awe much more. Much more. I think that would be a good thing in our world if more of us talked about awe more often.
Very
It
positive.
was positive. You had a positive experience?
Yeah.
Good. That's great. That's great. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Alan Fetterman?
I just think that because we have the context set for us here, it makes it easier to do. But I think that people are not a lot open to that sort of thing. It feels like, oh, you're trying to force your experience of religion or spirituality on me. It's hard to set the context for it, to make it something that can be accepted without some sort of guard or skepticism.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those cocktail party no-nos. Like you don't go up to someone and say, "Hey, when's the last time you had a good awe experience?" It's okay. No, I appreciate that. Right. I think that's yeah, that's very helpful. Margie?
Um, because I've hung around Robin Holzman, she has given me in walking around the lake. Once she said, every day, I should have asked your permission, Robin. Every day I look for a moment of awe. And I've got to say, that was one of the best gifts I've ever received. It's like doing a gratitude practice, which I try to every day before I go to sleep. And there is a crossover between gratitude and awe. So thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Thanks, Margie. Robin.
So I just want to say, and I spoke about this in our little breakout group, that I think I've shifted a little bit. Then rather than looking for it, I feel open to finding it. So I don't expect it, but it always comes. But there's a difference for me, and I probably have worked that out since we had that conversation. But I just want to say that.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin. All right. I appreciate everybody's willingness to to engage with this topic and this experience. So I think now I'd like to invite us to turn to the longer article called "The Quiet Profundity of Everyday Awe." And this guy, and I don't know how to, maybe someone else, I bet Deb knows how to pronounce his name. I want to say Dacher Keltner, but Dacher is probably not. I just see that CH and it makes me want to, huh, but could be Dacher, I don't know, but he is like one of the leading researchers on awe in the world, and he is the founder of the Greater Good Science Foundation at the University of California, Berkeley, which has a whole center that studies awe. And at the end of tonight's session, I'm going to share a link. Not that you guys couldn't easily find it on your own, but share a link to their website, and they have lots of resources for exploring awe on the website. And but this is like he wrote the book. He's the author of the book that Deb mentioned, and so this is just a very, very brief summary of some of the points that he makes in the book. And maybe, I'm sorry, Margie?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe we could just go around the screen and each take a paragraph if we're willing to, and if you don't want to read, that's fine. Just pass and we'll go to the next person. And maybe does everyone have this on the screen? You're able, oh, Nancy, you weren't able to get it?
It disappeared.
Oh, so do you have the link in the chat still that Robin put in?
No, it's
Oh.
not.
Oh,
She
so
just sent it again to me because I had lost it because I got kicked out and came back in. Which one are we reading
I'll
now?
send it out to everybody.
thank you,
Thanks.
Robin. It's called "The Quiet Profundity of Everyday Awe" is the title of the article.
Do you want me to, I could read the first paragraph. Or should
Sure.
I just wait?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's fine.
What gives you a sense of awe? The word awe, the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your understanding of the world, is also often associated with the extraordinary. You might imagine standing next to a 350-foot tall tree, or on a wide open plain with storm approaching, or hearing an electric guitar fill the space of an arena, or holding the tiny finger of a newborn baby. Awe blows us away. It reminds us that there are forces bigger than ourselves, and it reveals that our current knowledge is not up to the task of making sense of what we have encountered.
Thank you, Carol. Alan Fetterman, do you have this?
Find it again. Hold on.
That's all right.
It's two. Okay. But you don't need remarkable circumstances to encounter awe. When my colleagues and I asked research participants to track experiences of awe in a daily diary, we found, to our surprise, that people felt it a bit more than 2 times a week on average. And they found it in the ordinary, a friend's generosity, a leafy tree's play of light and shadow on a sidewalk, a song that transported them back to a first love.
Thank you. Thank you. So this point, again, a couple people mentioned this, but I think stereotypically, when people reflect on awe experiences, they do get drawn easily to, something that jumps out in a very, he uses the word extraordinary way. or unusual or rare. And what they found is that everybody, a lot of people, in fact, encounter what they experience as awe in a much more mundane context. And I think that's I find that very inspiring and exciting that is that's what's going on in our lives as human beings. And so that to me is one really big insight to take away from this article. Let's see. Nancy, do you have this in front of you now? Nancy Hecht. No. Okay. Okay. Would either of the Biajantis be willing to read? Okay, Sue.
Okay. We need that every day, even when it's discovered in the humblest places. A survey of relevant studies suggests that a brief dose of awe can reduce stress, decrease inflammation, and benefit the cardiovascular system. Luckily, we don't need to wait until we stumble upon it. We can seek it out. Awe is all around us. We just need to know where to look for it.
Thank you. We're going to get more next week into the whole conversation about what the experiences, the effects, the range of effects that awe brings to us physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and there's a wide range of them. But just kind of sticking with, for now, that it can be found, in lots of different ways, contrary maybe to many people's assumptions. Kevin, would you do the next paragraph?
Sure. In our daily diary studies, one source of awe was by far the most common: other people. Regular acts of courage, bystanders diffusing fights, subordinates standing up to abusive power holders, inspired awe. So did the simple kindness of others, seeing someone give money to a broke friend or assist a stranger on the street. But you don't need a serendipitous encounter with a good Samaritan to experience awe. We often find inspiring stories in literature, poetry, film, art, and the news. Reading about moral exemplars, say, protesting racism or protecting the environment, was a pervasive source of awe for our participants.
Thank you, Kevin. This was really brand new to me, that people's courageous behavior, people's empathic behavior, could be inspiring of awe to those who are witness to it. I thought that was, and not only that, but that it's actually the most common source of awe among those people who are researched. So that's just that fact was kind of mind blowing to me. That's because, again, I think the stereotype in mind certainly is the natural world is where I have tended to think where I'm going to find this sense of inspiration. And not that I'm not moved when hearing about human exemplars, but that that brings on a sense of awe for a lot of people. Nancy Rebel.
Okay. Another common source, is that where we
Yeah.
are?
Yep.
Another common source of awe is just taking a walk. In her cultural history of walking, Wanderlust, Rebecca Solnit theorized that walks can produce an awe-like form of consciousness in which we extend the self into the environment. We can make connections, for example, between our own thoughts and the other human beings we see moving through their day, or patterns in nature, the movements of wind through trees or the shifting clouds in the sky.
Thank you, Nancy. And Robin, would you do the next paragraph?
Along with Virginia Sturm, a UC San Francisco neuroscientist, I studied the effects of an awe walk. One group of subjects took a weekly walk for 8 weeks. The other group did the same, but with some instructions. Tap into your childlike sense of wonder. Imagine you're seeing everything for the first time. Take a moment during each walk to notice the vastness of things. When looking at a panoramic view, for example, or at the detail of a flower, and go somewhere new or try to recognize new features of the same old place. All of the participants reported on their happiness, anxiety, and depression and took selfies during their walks.
Thank you, Robin. Alan Binstock?
We found that the awe walkers felt more awe with each passing week. You might have thought that their capacity for awe would start to decrease. This is known as the law of hedonic adaptation, that certain pleasures or accomplishments, a new job, a bigger apartment, start to lose some of their thrill over time. But the more we practice awe, it seems, the richer it gets.
Thank you, Alan. I thought that was quite powerful. And I assume the same is true of gratitude, that as one builds the muscle, it actually, there's a self-reinforcing process that actually, where we become both better at finding it or experiencing it, but also that it's not something that it's the opposite of getting old. It just, the power of it builds for us as we get better at it. So that's kind of amazing to me. Margie, do you want to do a paragraph?
Yeah. Am I muted?
Uh,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. We also found evidence of Solnit's idea that the self can extend into the environment. In the awa condition, people's selfies increasingly included less of the self. Over time, the subjects drifted off to the side, showing more of the outside environment. A street corner in San Francisco, the trees, the rocks around the Pacific Ocean. Over the course of our study, all walkers reported feeling less daily distress and more pro-social emotions, such as compassion and amusement.
Thank you, Margie. I'll do the bottom one here. Excuse me. The arts, too, can make us feel connected to something boundless and beyond words. In one diary study, many people wrote that music brought them moments of awe and stirred them to consider their place in the great scheme of life. When we listen to music that moves us, dopaminergic pathways, circuitry in the brain associated with reward and pleasure are activated, which open the mind to wonder and exploration. In this bodily state of musical awe, we often get the chills. Signs studies have revealed that we are collectively engaged in making sense of the unknown. That would be an interesting. I know in the book he has a whole chapter on like physiological responses to awe, and the chills is one of them, and be an interesting thing to reflect on together about our experience of not because we're cold, right? It's when we have it, when we get those, they get the chills for, for a completely different reason. Carol, can we circle back to you for the second to last paragraph?
Okay, here we go. Okay. Visual art activates the same dopamine network in the brain and can have the same transcendent effect. When exposed to paintings, research has found people demonstrate greater creativity. One study, which involved more than 30,000 participants in the United Kingdom, found that the more people practiced or viewed art, the more those individuals donated money and volunteered 2 years later.
Thanks, Carol. And then Alan Fetterman, if you would finish it. Sorry.
It disappears every time I do that here. Let me get it back again here. Right. Okay. Nearly 3 years into the pandemic that's made many of us feel powerless and small, seeking out the immense and mysterious might not seem appealing. But often, engaging with what's overwhelming can put things in perspective. Staring up at a starry sky, looking at a sculpture that makes you shudder, listening to a medley of instruments joining into one complex, spine-tingling melody. Those experiences remind us that we're part of something that will exist long after us. We are well served by opening ourselves to awe wherever we can find it, even if only for a moment or two.
Thank you, Alan. All right. So I just thought this was a little bit more of a richer kind of introduction to this particular research. And again, I think the idea that there is no place that is off limits where one might encounter awe in any place, and maybe even there are ways to make it more likely that we will encounter awe. So we're gonna come back to this. Just any quick reactions or comments before we're gonna take a little bit of a turn here and look at some biblical texts that might be awe related. But Nancy, Bell?
Um, is there anything in this, or is anybody else experiencing this as, like, they talk about awe as like this huge thing, and I experience like gradations of it. Like, do they talk about how you can have degrees of awe? Like you can have a small amount of awe, like I think Deb said earlier about watching an ant. Do they talk
Right.
about all like having an experience of being on a continuum with it, or is it
Right.
really
That's
always a big thing? Does anybody know?
right. That's a great question.
Because of course I'm thinking of the mindfulness piece of it, and mindfulness is at the very beginning of all this, right? I mean, like you have to wake up and really notice something and have an experience of it being special before you can even get to awe. So I
Yeah.
keep like playing with the relationship between those two.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering.
That's a great question. Thank
Or
you.
if awe is really in these researchers' minds preserved for those big moments we're all talking about.
Well, I'll add to that. I think what you're saying is not only are the moments sometimes, of a lesser sense of awe, but sometimes we're not in a place where we can be, awe-inspired. Maybe we can get a little bit, but we're not there where we can get, a bigger experience. So it works both ways on the experiential exterior side and in terms of our abilities or where we're at the moment.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Yeah. Yeah. That's one would think there would be gradations. I feel like I did read something about that, but I didn't it wasn't in what I ended up putting into our folder for tonight. So, but let's keep that on the table too, along with the question of accommodation. And maybe we can get some more information about it for next week. All right, we have a little bit of time to turn to some biblical texts, and so this is the third document that's in the folder, and let me just see what I thought we could just kind of, we don't have time to look at the entire list of texts, but thought it might be interesting just to read through a few of them and, kind of ask ourselves, are we seeing reflections in any of these biblical texts of anything that we've been talking about or reading about in terms of contemporary scientific exploration of this part of human experience? So where did we leave off? Let's see. Nancy Hecht, I'm guessing you don't have this in front of you. You do you? You don't. Okay. All right.
I have a computer limitation.
No problem. All right. Sue, would you maybe be willing to read the first text from Genesis? Oh, gotta just get you unmuted.
Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he placed it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky. The messengers of God were going up and down on it. And standing beside him was Yahweh, who said, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham's house and the God of Isaac's house. The ground on which you are lying, I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the north, to the south, to the east and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely Yahweh is present in this place, and I did not know it. Shaken, he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven.
Thank you, Sue. All right. So this is kind of a classic text, right? Jacob, of course, is just leaving from his family of origin, having, stolen the birthright, the blessing from his brother, and really his father, tricking his father into that, and he's on his way to escape from his brother's wrath, and this is really the first thing that happens to him on that trip. But that may or may not be relevant to this question. Carol?
Well, one thing in relation to what Nancy brought up a moment ago, I think I could look at that. You could look at that dream. I mean, if you don't look so much at the content, if I think of myself sometimes in mindfulness, you have a new understanding of something. See, I mean, I know the content of the dream is but if you think of it in terms of like a small everyday thing, we could also look at it as just like a profound insight that again was quite monumental to him. And, this is one of the pivotal things talked about in the Torah, but it really is a somewhat, if I think about like a dream is really just in the moment. or it may not even, it may be a thought. I mean, who knows? But anyway, because Nancy's question made me think that, is it always, because I think there are mindfulness, but this is an example to me that I realized could also be small, even though it was quite transformative for him.
Great. Thank you. Right. So sometimes dreams can feel awe-inducing, right? People can wake up from a dream and feel like something powerful has happened, even if they don't remember the content of the dream. And he gets this is the first time he felt like, again, in the context of the story of the Torah, this is the first time that the God of his father has communicated with him directly, as far as we know. So this is like, it's a very much a new stage in his life. And he's discovered something, he thinks it's interesting because he seems to think that the place where he chose to put his head, he just lucked out that he picked God's place, but, other people might say, well, he could have slept anywhere and had that same dream. But yeah, that's very helpful, Carol. Thank you. Anything else about this text as a text of awe, Alan Binstock?
I think the key phrase for me is the phrase that I did not know it. And I think in the Hebrew, isn't it, and I did not know it?
It does, yes, there's a
Right.
repetition of the I, yeah.
And so to me, it's key because it's the sense that, awe is all around you, and what you need to do is open your eyes and be aware and wake up. And so I think that to me, that's the message I get from I did not know it. It's being aware and opening your eyes to the awe all around you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Yeah.
The awe-inducing, I should say, all around you.
Say that last sentence one more time. I'm sorry.
The awe-inducing.
Awe-inducing, right. Yeah. Yeah. And it takes, I don't know if Jacob ever gets to that point in his life. I mean, he has this kind of waking up experience, but he, I don't know if he ever kind of fully realizes the potential that he touched in that moment when he woke up from the dream. Great. Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's take a very different angle on this. The next one from the beginning of Exodus. Let's see, Kevin.
Exodus 1:15 through 17, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, saying, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, fearing or being in awe of God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay. So this is a whole different angle on, and maybe, we haven't really delved into, although a couple people mentioned it, I think Deb did and someone else did too, about how one of the effects of awe can be empathy and greater willingness to care for other people, even if you don't know them. And but still, even with that, this is a, in Hebrew, Yirat Adonai the awe or fear of God. And it impacts on their behavior, on their choices, on what they're willing and not willing to do, even at risk of their own lives.
Steve,
Yes, yeah, Margie.
what is the irat? Could that mean awe as well as fear? I'm just wondering in the Hebrew context.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that is when people translate awe into Hebrew, yirah is the word that is used. You know, some Jewish teachers have argued that there are a number of different words for fear in Hebrew. And yirah is one of them, and pachad is another one. And some people have argued that pachad is kind of a mortal physical fear, and yirah is more of an existential awe-based fear. I think if we did a study of this verb in the context of the Torah, I think that thesis would be a little difficult to defend, because sometimes yirah does seem to mean a more mortal, physically based fear, but it doesn't. Here, it's hard to interpret that way. I think it certainly wouldn't be limited to that. In order to, I mean, I guess you could say, well, the midwives only undermined Pharaoh because they were afraid that God was going to punish them if they followed Pharaoh's orders. I mean, that would be the most cynical reading of that verse. But no, it is, I mean, it's certainly, awe is always a potential component of that word, yirah. And when Jacob woke up from the dream, he said, how awesome is this place? Manorah hamakom hazeh. So that's the same root, right? So he's using norah, I think, there as he's not talking about being physically afraid, I don't think, in that moment, although that may be a component too, but he's really talking about being aware of something that is so powerful that he was not aware of before. So anyway, I don't know. This was just
wondering. Yep.
No, it was a good question. It was a good question. Paula, I thought we lost you. I'm so glad you're back. I'm sorry.
I was outside, actually.
Okay. All
I
right.
go outside for a reason.
Okay. All right. That's all right. That's all right. I'll just say that we won't have time to do other, parallel text, but that phrase, awe of God or awe of heaven in the Bible seems to be an expression that connotes basic moral understanding. If you are a fearer of God or heaven, that means that you have an understanding of basic human morality, and it's used mostly to describe non-Jewish biblical personalities. Like when Abraham and Sarah, the two times when Abraham lies about his relationship to Sarah and calls her his sister, and the king, that they're interacting with, then the king thinks Sarah is available because she's not married to Abraham, because she's his sister. And when Pharaoh and the other king of Gerar confronts Abraham about, well, why did you lie to me? And his answer is, I didn't think there was any, Yirat Elohim in this place. I didn't think there was any fear of God. And I don't think he didn't mean people weren't afraid for their lives that God was going to come after them. It meant they didn't have kind of a basic moral compass. And that's the phrase that the Torah seems to use for that. So, okay, let's see here. We just have time for a couple more. How about well, I think we have to do the Exodus one because I think who mentioned that before? The standing at Mount Sinai. Carol did. Okay. All right. Nancy Rebel, it's Exodus 20. It's the fourth text down.
The one that says 15:18?
Yeah.
Sure. All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the blare of the horn, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance. You speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey. But let not God speak to us, lest we die. Moses answered the people, Be not afraid, for God has come only in order to test you, and in order that the awe of God may be ever with you, so that you do not go astray. So the people remained at a distance, while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was.
Thank you, Nancy. So I just want to point out, given Margie's question, when Moses says to the people, be not afraid, he says, al tira'u. You know, he says, don't be afraid or don't be in awe. I don't think he means in awe in that. He means don't be afraid. You know, don't be fearful. But the word that the Hebrew root that's used is the same. Is Yud Resh Aleph. The other thing about this text that I think, you know, we might have a chance to talk more about next week is this idea of there's awe that we experience as individuals, and then there's an awe that becomes possible when we're in a group. There's a kind of, and that's actually a category of experience that is identified as awe-inspiring, is when you're part of a large group that is going through a shared experience that can be an awe-inducing situation. Kevin?
I find the phrase, for God has come only in order to test you, I find that frightening.
Right. I get that. I mean, look, yeah, I mean, one of the things that Keltner writes about in his research is that he does kind of a natural history of the awe experience, and he locates, he says the original use of this word in the languages that he can find it are all connected. Of course, we're seeing this. They're all connected to proximity to the divine or to the supernatural. And so at its earliest development, that's what inspired awe in people. And of course, if people were present for a natural disaster, they probably attributed that natural disaster to the actions of a divine being. So everything was like all tied together. And he argues that over time and history, experience, a more positive, less threatening experience of and understanding of awe emerged in lots of different human communities. But so the Torah is definitely seems to be from this layer of human experience where there is some kind of threat. Although again, Jacob doesn't seem like he feels threatened to me when he wakes up from the dream. It's very interesting. But a lot of these texts do carry that with it, like this Exodus, standing at Mount Sinai definitely has that sense. All right, Nancy, and then Carol.
What it sort of feels like to me, and I love how you just pointed that out, because I was thinking, is everything in the Torah about awe fear-based? And what you just said that, he said about that was really helpful to me. I wonder if part of it was like the evolution of humankind, that originally, when there was the experience of awe, humans felt so small in comparison to these big things. And maybe, ironically enough, the development of the ego has helped humans be able to not be so scared of these big events, but just really filled up by these big events.
Huh.
It's really an interesting
That's,
way to think about
that
it.
is an interesting, that's a really interesting theory. Thank you for sharing that. That's someone, you should send an
A
email to
paper.
Dr. Keltner and say, hey,
What do
have
you
you
think
thought
about this?
about this?
I mean, because I'd be interested in other cultures of a similar time period, if there's any descriptions of awe that's just awe of like seeing. I was thinking also about like shooting stars and things like that, like I wonder if this is just a Torah thing or if this was a time period, it just.
Right. No, that's a great question. All right, Carol and then Robin, and then we're going to wrap up. Yeah.
Just wondering, before when you were talking with Margie about the different verbs and things, and you know the story with Balaam where he's going to curse the people and then he blesses them, and he wasn't Jewish. I mean, is that one of, do you know if that is that verb tense where it would be? I mean, do you happen to know if it was like that fair? Because isn't it that he's fearing God and then instead he blesses them?
Um,
Or maybe
that
not.
is a great question. No,
Because I was also thinking, I wonder if that's empathy too. I wonder if that goes here, but anyway,
right.
I remembered, anyway, very scant knowledge of it, but
No, that's I think we could all check
okay.
the Balaam story and see if he's described. One thing that there is the place where I know fear appears in that story is that the impetus for the king of Moab to call Balaam to put a curse on the Israelites is because the king is afraid of the Israelites, and he needs a secret weapon, and so Balaam is a secret weapon, but maybe Balaam is described as having awe or fear of God too. That's very possible. He clearly in his actions demonstrates that because he says, "I can only do what God allows me to do."
Because when you were saying too, they're non-Israelites. I mean, that's some
right.
Anyway, just one.
That would be interesting that would be, let's check that. Let's check that. I'll add that to my list. Thank you, Carol. All right, Robin.
It seems like the awe in the biblical sense is like restriction and boundaries. Jacob, you will be this people, and the whole thing. And yet, when we think of awe, we think of expansion and or I think of expansion and vastness, and so it's like the awe is of God, but the whole purpose is to sort of define and restrict and control. And so I don't know.
That's interesting too. That's so I appreciate you pointing that out. We won't have time to look at this text, but it is there's a text from Psalms towards the end of this list that from Psalms 8 that I think gets a little bit more maybe at what you're talking about, Robin, in terms of, again, it's connected with God, but it is inspired by the vastness of the natural world. Yeah. So thank you. No, that's I know it's like we just started and we're concluding here. So here's what I would like to encourage us and invite us to do between now and next Monday evening. And let me see if I can put this into the chat. So this Greater Good Science Center They have a bunch of resources. They have a whole section on awe. I'm gonna paste the link into the chat. And there's a subsection which says, how do I cultivate awe? And there are like 4 or 5 different suggestions. So I'm just going to invite us to try out one of these things. Try out one thing once or twice, and for 5 minutes or 10 minutes between now and next Monday, if you're game for that. And just see what you think. Some of them are, they're one of them is this awe walk idea that we were reading about, where you go on a walk and you be very intentionally open to what you might experience. But you can go on the internet and just look at videos of amazing stuff, and that apparently can be awe-invoking for people. There is also, if you want to, on the same website, there's a little awe quiz. It's like a 21 or 22 question. Quiz is the wrong word. It's an assessment. It's like just trying to get a sense of how one is oriented towards experiences that might be awe-producing. And so if you just want to, it's not a might just be an interesting thing to kind of answer the questions, and if you want to give that a try. And then next week, when we get back together, we'll start by asking if anyone had a chance to do any of these awe activities, and if they had any, thoughts or experiences that they wanted to share from that. So great. Well, thanks again, everybody, and thanks to Alan Fetterman for hosting again, and Robin for co-hosting and helping to get things into the chat. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys. I hope many of us will be together next Monday evening, and we have morning show, we have weekday shofar for the rest of the week, and we have mindful Jewish practice on Wednesday evening at 7:30 that Nancy Rubel is leading, and that's going to be focused also on Elul and preparing for the High Holy Days. So, Nancy, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about that.
Only to thanks, Steve. Only to mention to make sure to look in the update where you'll find the link for Wednesday night and a link to the documents we'll be using. That makes it sound so formal, but it's just we're gonna read one poem together to reflect on, to just inspire us each Wednesday night.
Thank you
And
very
then
much,
sit a
Nancy.
bit if you'd like to. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. So, all right. Well, wishing everybody a good night, and see you very soon, I hope. Okay, and a good continuing Elul process, and may we all find more awe in our lives.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Night night.
Good night.
Bye.